So we're going to begin with just a little bit of a recap about yesterday's wonderful sessions. We had a packed agenda led by Dr. Mona Bahut. We had an introduction about the Sheikh Khalifa Stroke Institute by Dr. Victor Urrutia. And then we had a keynote address on the future of stroke care and recovery by Dr. Dan Handley, where he talked about the importance of rehabilitation trials and what we need to consider to make sure that we run them and that we run them well. And then we had a very exciting lecture on behavior and brain repair by Dr. John Krakauer, where he talked about the basic science of neural recovery, what we have known for a long time and what we are relearning and understanding all over again. And then that was followed by what we can learn from research on pediatric stroke, Learning from the Young by Dr. Ryan Felling. That was followed by Looking for Clues, Imaging the Brain Across the Continuum of Stroke Recovery by Dr. Richard Lee, where he talked to us about the new imaging modalities available, what they can tell us and what they cannot, and how certain types of imaging might even predict ongoing pathology, such as inflammation that might predict perhaps dementia down the road. And that was capped off by Dr. Bahut's talk with a panel on the stroke unit of the future, where she was joined by Dr. Dina Saylor, who runs a stroke unit in Zambia. And then eventually we had patient and care partner experiences that were shared by the patients and moderated by Dr. Elizabeth Zink. So it was a wonderful agenda, and it's all accessible to you. It's all recorded. Remember, you get 14 and a quarter CME credits for engaging in this conference over 2 days. And you have access to the videos until July 8th. So please do avail of the opportunity to get your credits. So what do we have in store for you today? So we have 3 sessions and several exciting talks within each session. Today's session is on rehabilitation and recovery. We're going to talk, first I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what we've been trying to build as part of the Sheikh Khalifa Stroke Institute here at Johns Hopkins. And as many of you know, the Sheikh Khalifa Stroke Institute was made possible by a very generous gift from the government of the United Arab Emirates. And we are extremely grateful for this opportunity. And we're grateful for the opportunity to give back in terms of this conference, as well as all of the learnings that we are sharing with you. So I'm going to share a little bit about the Sheikh Khalifa Stroke Institute's model of recovery and rehabilitation. And then we will kick off the keynote lecture by Dr. Walter Frontera, who's going to talk to us on sarcopenia after stroke. And this will be part of the first session, which is going to be on advances in the basic science of stroke recovery and rehabilitation, where in contrast to yesterday's sessions, which were top-down, where we were talking about stroke, which indeed is because of injury to the brain, here we're going to talk about a bottom-up approach. We were going to begin by talking about the muscles and the role that they play in disability after stroke. And then we're going to talk about how we can provide precision rehabilitation in the real world in the second session. And that will be followed by what we can do to enhance rehabilitation beyond what is traditionally offered, and how we need to engage the patients not just while they are with us in the hospital, but also beyond, beyond the hospital, in perhaps outpatient therapy, as well as home care and subacute. But what happens beyond that? How can the patient be engaged in their own communities? And what can we do to facilitate that? So it is indeed a jam-packed day, and I would welcome interaction from all of you. You're welcome to chat with us at this time. The chat is open briefly. Please feel free to share your greetings from wherever you are in the world. We'd love to hear your greetings. And we will then close the chat, but keep the Q&A open. The Q&A is for interaction between you and the panelists, and we'll be watching that closely throughout the day, and we'll make sure to answer your questions, either live or in the Q&A itself. So please find the Q&A buttons and do keep chatting with us and let us know your feedback. Well, without further ado, I am going to share my screen and talk to you briefly about what we have done as part of the generous gift from the Sheikh Khalifa family and the government of the UAE. So I'm going to quickly share my screen now. Okay, so one of the major questions that we were trying to answer was, how can we provide early, high-frequency stroke rehabilitation in the real world? And this is important because if you were here yesterday and listened to the lectures, there's a ton of evidence out there that early, high-frequency rehabilitation can indeed facilitate recovery, right? But our reality, our economic reality, is somewhat different. In the United States, we are curtailed by insurance and the regulations that they impose on us. In other parts of the world, it may be other types of economic realities. So yesterday's sessions talked about the importance of stroke rehabilitation, and particularly early and high frequency rehabilitation. So what we did, and there's a huge gap in the way we provide rehabilitation today, and that is that patients are shunted from one place to another, as a result of which the focus of many of our professionals in the field is on triage and transition of care rather than on recovery. So we really felt that if we can do good with this gift that we received, then it is to really try to change the status quo and see if we can do better. The current model of care that we have in the United States is such that it is the people who are most likely to go home that tend to get a lot of rehabilitation up front. But if they are impaired enough that they may not be able to go home right away or after a brief stint of rehabilitation, then they actually tend to get less rehabilitation, which doesn't seem to be quite right, right? So the desired model of care would be where we treat everyone equally and give them the rehabilitation that they need so that they can recover to their fullest potential. So how do we do that? Well, we came up with the Sheikh Khalifa Stroke Institute's model of care for recovery and rehabilitation. And this was based on these 5 prongs where we decided that we needed to, first of all, integrate care across levels. So it's very difficult to look at continuity of care or look at recovery when, the treatment at the acute stroke unit is siloed from what is received in the inpatient rehabilitation unit, which itself is siloed from what is happening in outpatient or home care or subacute. They all seem to be distinct units, and everybody tends to only worry about what happens to the patient there. But since the patient goes to all these places, we felt that it is an imperative to really look at what's best for the patient rather than what's happening in these individual silos. So we felt it's really important to integrate care across levels. And I'll tell you briefly what that meant for us. And then we also felt that if we were going to be able to track recovery, we need to build an outcomes database. We need to use the same measures across these levels of care and across the continuum so that we could see how patients are actually improving or not improving and what we can do to facilitate their recovery. So we came together to build an outcomes database, and you're going to hear all about the challenges as well as how we address them. And then we decided that if we have those outcomes, then we can certainly use them to develop algorithms to deliver rehabilitation more precisely. So the right treatment for the right patient at the right time, so that we can manage the resources. How do we engage patients, those who are fairly impaired to those who are not as impaired, across the continuum, and facilitate their recovery? It may be that we teach the patients who are already doing quite well to do more by themselves, and we provide more of the hands-on approach to those who really need it and who can't do without it. And of course, eventually we have to demonstrate the effectiveness of the model once we have accumulated enough data. But a huge part of what we are here to do today is to disseminate our learnings through this learning network that we've created, and you are all a part of it. What integration needs to occur? We need to have integration in terms of operations, that is the programming across the continuum of care, outcome assessments, technology, and you're going to be hearing about that, and of course, education. We have created a number of programs, some of which are familiar to many of you. There's the Early Mobilization Training, or the AMP program, that mobilizes everybody regardless of their diagnosis extremely early. We have the ARISE program, which is the hyperacute interdisciplinary rehabilitation in the stroke unit that you heard about yesterday from Dr. Bahout, where we are really trying to provide 3 hours of rehabilitation in the acute stroke unit itself. And of course, how that is structured is different from the way it is structured in inpatient rehabilitation. And then, of course, there's the inpatient rehabilitation facility, or the IRF, where we provide acute interdisciplinary rehabilitation. And then there's the post-acute facilities, including outpatient. And the idea is that across this continuum, we have similar outcomes measurement, technology implementation, education, and training, so none of these are siloed. Integration of care across levels also means that we integrate 3 models of care. The medical model, which is providing treatment to facilitate biological recovery and normalize physiology to reduce impairment. And that means treating the impairment, for example, strengthening. However, we understand that clearly what patients are interested in is, are they going to be able to feed themselves, walk to the bathroom, do the functional things that they need to do? And so we have to use the educational model to teach the patients to function, while we want to also reduce impairment. So it's, to some people, that means, allow the patient to compensate, allow them to use their unaffected hand if their affected hand is impaired. However, we want to make sure that that type of substitution doesn't become a habit and doesn't impede recovery. So the educational model needs to take into account functional retraining while also at the same time addressing impairment. Finally, we also need the self-management model because clearly stroke is not like the common cold. It is a long-term proposition, and recovery is complex. We're still trying to understand it. And we know that the patient and the family also need to be involved. So how do we teach them to manage their conditions? How do we teach them to still go out there and participate in their social roles? We need to provide self-efficacy training, and you're going to hear about this as well. So the integration is not just across the continuum of care, it is to integrate the medical, educational, and self-management model as well. Building the database involves creating a core minimum set of measures that we use on everybody as part of standard of care. And then we may have additional evaluations for research. How do we implement this? How do we make it worth the while of the people administering these measurements? You're going to hear all about that. And then finally, how do we create the right program for the right patient at the right time? What sense can we make of the data? And then finally, how do we disseminate this, break down the silos of care, teach one another, teach our patients and their caregivers, and develop enhanced standards of care for stroke rehabilitation? We have recently compiled a lot of our learnings and published them in a supplement issue of the American Journal of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. This is accessible to you on the website of the American Journal of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. So please do access it. There's a link available too, which I'll be happy to put on the chat. So our next step then that we hope to share with you over the next few years is to demonstrate the feasibility, efficacy, and cost effectiveness of this new model of care. Now, all of this has only been made possible through collaboration between the Departments of Neurology and Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. So for that, I'm really grateful to all of our collaborators here at Johns Hopkins and as well as in the United Arab Emirates. So thank you all for working with us, for working together to improve stroke care.